I have a guest this morning that I really want you to meet because he has simplified a lot of things for me, and he's done it for thousands of other people as well. And he's got the most interesting career path as well. So I thought, you know what, I need to bring him on the NPA report so y'all can meet him. Uh, Nick Daugherty, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Honored to be here with you today.
So you're the financial cop. We're going to get into that in a minute. But let's talk about you being a real cop.
Yep.
And I'm going to ask you what I always ask everyone who comes on the show who is in law enforcement or was in law enforcement. Why'd you become a cop?
Yeah, it wasn't a straightforward path. It's actually one of those that if you had told me 6 months prior to joining the force that I was going to be a cop, I probably would have laughed at you. I was selling senior trips to high school kids, making a crap load of money, getting to go to Cancun every summer. And to be honest, it was getting kind of old dealing with 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old kids that were changing their mind every other second. And my roommate at the time ended up, he did always want to become a cop, and he became a cop at the DeSoto Police Department here in North Texas. And I got to watch him go through the academy, and he was really enjoying it. And I thought, man, this sounds like it might be something that would be cool to do. And so I just started applying at agencies, and the Grand Prairie Police Department was the first to say yes. And boy, what a blessing! I never did in my wildest dreams that I think it was going to turn out the way it turned out to. And I wouldn't change anything about becoming a cop, even though that's not what I wanted to do.
So let me ask you this. So you were obviously a really good salesman. And I've always said that cops, of the many hats that we wear, we're salespeople, aren't we? Talk about that.
You are. I mean, you sell yourself at every call for service, whether you're selling yourself to stop the fight or to get out of the fight or de-escalate or talk that person off the bridge. I mean, it's one of the things that kind of drives me bonkers. I hear all these cops that say, well, all I know how to do is be a cop. No, you have so many skills that you have no idea. And sales is one of those because you sell yourself every single day of your career.
That's so well said. Now let's look at the past 4 years or so where we've really seen this, not just a physical war on cops, but this administrative war on cops, this political war on cops. We're starting to see it turn around.
Yep.
um, but what do you think about when you go from defunding the police and the vilification of the American law enforcement officer to where we're at now?
Yeah. So first off, let's make no mistake. The only reason we're in a good place right now is because we haven't had a controversial shoot in a while. It's coming, and we better prepare for it. And so we better kind of you talk about build your stock up now. We're building our stock up right now with all the things we're doing from a community policing and all that fun stuff. But make no mistake, it's coming back. We're going to be under attack again, and that's why we have to prepare so much for life after law enforcement, whether it's finances, whether it's mental, whether it's what's your next career from a sales or whatever, and building those skill sets to start to work towards the next event that's it's coming. We just don't know when.
So let's talk about that. In fact, you and I have had this discussion. Nobody becomes a cop to get rich. However, even cops can become rich if they plan properly, can't
Yep.
they?
When I started getting involved in the financial wellness space of things, I studied two things. I studied marketing of money and debt, and I studied millionaires. And one of the most interesting statistics of millionaires, and the largest study ever done a couple of years ago, was by a guy named Chris Hogan, and the book was called The Everyday Millionaire. They surveyed 11,000 millionaires, and a third of those millionaires became millionaires even though they never earned more than $100,000 in one given year. And so I tell people all the time, they're like, well, I'm a cop, right? I didn't get in this to become wealthy. No, we didn't get in this to become wealthy. But if you do the right things, you damn well can become wealthy. I mean, we're playing the biggest game every day. It's called the game of money. And especially if you're working in a major metropolitan area, I mean, major cops in major metropolitans, you're going to earn $3 or $4 million over the course of your career. So you are a millionaire. It's just what you do with those pieces of the puzzle that dictates whether you get to keep it or you retire broke.
When I was a very young cop in the 80s, one of the older guys came to me and said, hey, you need to come to this meeting after roll call. They're going to talk about something about retirement. And I was like, well, don't we get a pension? Why do I need to talk to some guy about retirement? And he's like, trust me, kid, you just need to come. And so I did, even though naively, and again, this was in the 80s when financially in this country, things were going pretty good. Politically,
Yep.
things were going good. And I started putting this tiny amount of money. And, you know, again, I came from very humble. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a farmer, and that was incredibly helpful. Talk about what people should do, whether they're cops, teachers, firefighters, or whatever, to plan for retirement past just a pension.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing you need to realize is that you're not immune. We've all done stupid with money. And so don't think just because you've done stupid with money, you can't turn it around. I mean, I went $80,000 in debt before I was a cop, 21,000. That was in one car stereo system. Yes, just one. And I paid off all $80,000 in debt in 24 months, working 1,000 hours of overtime. I kind of turned what people call as the pitfall of working overtime and part-time jobs into a kind of a bonus of, if I want to go on a vacation, I work overtime. If I want to fund my wife's 401k plan, I work overtime. And the reality is the pension's not enough to retire on usually. Most of us are going to take a pay cut. And if we don't start looking at other retirement aspects, we lose our most valuable asset, which is time. And so start to look at and learn a lot of the features when it comes to whether it's a 457 deferred comp account, a 401k, a 403b, whatever you have, and start now, because it's a marathon, not a sprint. Nobody got rich quick in this scenario. I meet a whole lot of people in the retirement space that say, I sure wish I had saved more. I've never met one person that looked back and said, man, I wish I hadn't saved so much. And if you don't start early, you lose the time and it becomes tougher every year you delay.
What do you recommend for parents, um, to talk about to young kids when it comes to financial things?
Start talking to them young. I actually have a lot of my friends that kind of laugh at me because I have Zach who's about to be 13 and I have Kylie who's 9, and we joke, and you think, you know, back in the day, right? I grew up and I got an allowance. And so what is an allowance? It's free money. Let's kind of equate that to government handouts, right? You know, one of my favorite shirts is from a company that's like, it's got a picture of the Monopoly guy and it says, you know, capitalism, because I make my money, not take my money. And we started putting our kids on not an allowance, but a commission scale. They get paid a commission for everything they do. Now, there are some things they do because they're our kids, and you're not getting paid for that because you're our kids, but you get a commission, and we pay our kids a commission once a month. They have to take that commission and they have to make three choices. How much of this am I going to give away? I.e., let's do some charitable contributions. How much of this am I going to spend and what am I going to save for? My son actually made me such a proud dad. This summer, last year he had a budgeting project and we were going over his monthly budget. I'm like, Zach, where's your retirement plan? And he's like, what? And so we started talking about investing. And so I gave him $100 to start an S&P 500 fund to start teaching about investing. And he's 12 right now. I'll be 13 in a couple of weeks. And so this was the first summer he got to start mowing lawns and earning real money. And he came to me in June and he goes, Daddy, you know, this is my commission for the month. I go, okay. He goes, I got a question. Can I contribute a percent of this to my S&P 500 fund? I'm like, oh, yes, you can. And I go, how much? And he goes, I'm going to do 30%. I go, okay. I said, well, let me introduce you to another concept. It's called the company match. If you do 30%, I'll do 30%. But if you lower it, I'm going to lower it too. We got to start teaching our kids concepts about money. Stop doing allowances. Make them understand that you don't get money, you earn money. And something as simple as changing it from an allowance to a commission, making them start to do some budgeting. My kid, you know, my son he's involved in some of the budgeting aspects every month. He knows how much the electricity bill. We can't wait till they're 18 and about to leave the house to teach them about this stuff. They got to start learning about it early. And you'd be amazed at how many young teenager, 13-year-old kids are very interested in learning about money.
I love that idea. When we talk about law enforcement officers, we often talk about the mental health aspects of this job. You know, it's of course it's difficult seeing the horrible things that cop sees every day. It's difficult to worry about, am I going to get written up? Am I going to get indicted for doing my job? Am I going to get hurt? All these things. Part of mental health stress, if you will, for a cop sometimes is money, isn't it?
It's a huge thing, actually. You can tie money back to a lot of discipline issues at a department. I mean, we've all heard the stories of cops stealing Pokemon cards at Target or forging an overtime sheet trying to get a little bit extra money. And let's talk about the injury aspect, right? It's not a matter of if in our industry, it's when we get injured. And now we can't work the overtime, and finances becomes the issue because I don't have the overtime job. Let's talk relationships. Number one cause of divorce and fights in America is money. And, our job, I mean, heck, just take money in general. Law enforcement has one of the top 5 most stressful careers in the country right now. And you throw money problems in the mix, and it's a recipe for disaster. And I'll go a step further. We lose more of our brothers and sisters to suicide than we ever will in the line of duty. What are the top 2 reasons given for suicide in America? Relationships and money. 2 things we suck at.
That's a great point. And that's the thing. We die more than 2.5 times by our own hand as we do by felonious assaults. And money is a big issue. Stress is a big issue. Relationships, huge issues for law enforcement. Now, one of the things that the defund the cop movement really has pushed and continues to push is this idea that we must get rid of qualified immunity. Now, a lot of people think qualified immunity, which police officers have in the United States, basically gives us carte blanche to do anything we want and with zero consequences. Can you talk about that, and then talk about, from a financial perspective, what would that mean financially to your average law enforcement officer if we didn't have qualified immunity?
We wouldn't have cops. Why would you risk your entire financial side? It's funny. There's a guy that that's actually about to become a financial cop likely. And one of his quotes when he got out of law enforcement was, "I got into this job knowing I could take a bullet in the face. I didn't get in this job to take a bullet in the back." And you think about qualified immunity, people think it's the save all end all especially in the defund the police side of things. Look, if you got a bad cop that does bad things and violates the law and does criminal things, they're not going to have qualified immunity. It's not there for those cops. It's there for the cops that are making those split-second decisions, whether it's life or death or whatever, in the scope of their work, to protect them no more so than it protects our judges out there and those kinds of things. And you get rid of qualified immunity, cops are going to leave in droves. And I always tell people, people talk to me a lot about the trust world, and I'm no state attorney. But when it comes to creating a trust to protect our assets, I always tell people, qualified immunity goes away. We're not going to be doing trust. We're probably going to be having conversations with the state attorneys about how do I create my own personal LLC to protect ourselves from that aspect of it. And so it's huge. It's not there to protect the bad cops. Just like us good cops hate the bad cops, qualified immunity is there to protect the good cops, not the bad cops.
Yeah, very, very well said. We also hear, when we're talking about, the anti-cop movement in this country, we hear a lot about our retirements and pensions, because not everybody in the country who works has a retirement system and pension system, things like that. And our pension systems, law enforcement, have changed greatly. The system that I started under in 1980 is probably vastly different than the pension system you start under, and so on and so on. But there's this mistaken belief that somehow cops get these wildly huge pensions and they don't put any money into it, or this or that. Can you talk about the current pension system? I know it varies state to state, agency to agency, but just talk a little bit about what our viewers as taxpayers are paying for when it comes to local law enforcement retirements.
The vast majority of pensions in America are funded, especially in law enforcement, by contributions from the first responder. You look at the retirement space, and the people that don't have pensions, that have 401ks, most officers are contributing a much higher percent than the average American contributes percentage-wise to their own 401k plan. So the whole fallacy that cops aren't paying for it. Yeah, I've seen cops as little as 7%. I've seen some agencies have to contribute 18% of their income into the pension so that when they retire, they can take a 25 to 50% pay cut. there are not a lot of pension systems in this country in law enforcement that a cop gets to retire unless they want to work 40 something years where they get to replace their entire income. So, no, it's not this golden goose for first responders. It's a great tool. We preach heavily. I love pensions, right? They're great. It's a guaranteed income for the rest of your life. But the reality is, the pension very rarely is enough to retire on, which is why it's so important for my cops listening to this that they better be looking at their other retirement plans, whether it's IRAs or 457s or 401ks. The pension is not a golden ticket. And most cops that are young think it's that golden ticket. And by the time they realize it's not, they lost their most valuable asset, which is time.
So, Nick, there's a whole lot of talk about politics, the economy, people's retirements, just in general, not just first responders, but everyone. And we are seeing a lot of older folks still working, some like me, because we want to, but some people because they have to. Where do you see the economy now? Where do you see it going forward?
Yeah, economic wise, the economy is actually a little stronger than most people think it is right now. It is slowing, but we still have this ugly word called inflation. Yes, inflation has kind of come back to a normal level. Just because it's back at roughly 2 to 3% annually doesn't negate the fact that we're still up 20% from the start. So prices don't go back down. And it's kind of like the whole political aspect of when it comes to politicians, a lot of times they're gonna twist and say something to fit their narrative per se. Dave Ramsey. I followed Dave for a long time. One of my favorite quotes from him is the person in the White House doesn't dictate what happens in your house as much as you'd like to think it does. Sometimes you control your personal finances. You mentioned you're working because you want to. To me, that's kind of the new pinnacle of retirement. Very few people retire anymore. We tell people the vision of retirement in America is kind of one of we go back to work because we want to, because we're bored, and if our boss makes us mad, we walk out the door. You magically will not go work in places you don't want to work. You'll only follow your passion. And for those of us that are stuck because frankly we didn't make the right decisions early on and we have to work longer, the worst time to start looking at your future is when you stop sucking wind because you're out of time. If we throw a pity patty party because I didn't start this when I was 23, I'm 62, it's too late for me. It's not too late for you to start to make some changes that can have vast impacts on the quality of your life financially, mentally, the whole nine yards. You just have to start. I end my financial wellness class with one of my favorite quotes. The magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding. You just got to put the work on. And one of my other favorite quotes in the class is from Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're 100% correct. You can win at anything you want to in life. You just have to apply yourself.
So if you are 50 or 60 years old or even younger in your 40s, but you're like, damn, I didn't start this, at 18 or 21 or whatever. What are the first three things that anybody should do if they want to get their financial act back together?
Budget, budget, budget. I don't care if
Everyone is shaking their heads right now, Nick. Nobody likes to budget.
it's that dreaded B word. I know. Budgeting is the number one skill set when it comes to winning with money. I don't care if you're $250,000 in debt. I don't care if you're making $250,000 a month. I've worked with both people. The first thing I talked to both people was the budget. If you're trying to start to turn your financial picture around until you get control of your spending and understand what you're spending in the budget, you can't start to get your head above water. Now, the other side of this spectrum is all too often people start winning with money and they get comfortable and they go, I don't need to budget anymore. I got a couple $1,000s left over at the end of the month. And then creep starts coming in. And next thing you know, it's like, where'd my money go? The minute you start to win with money, the budget becomes even more important because we need to understand what that excess is going for. Is that going because I want to go on a vacation? Is it going because I want to buy a better car? Is it going towards extra retirement? A budget doesn't constrict your spending. It actually helps you spend more because you understand where the money's going instead of wondering where it went.
So back to law enforcement, you advise cops, and what would you say to young people now in this current atmosphere where 9 out of 10 large police departments are still short-staffed. We're having a hard time bringing young people
Yep.
to this profession. And one of the reasons is, you don't make that much money being a cop. What do you advise young people who are looking at law enforcement but are thinking, boy, I don't know if I want to get involved in law enforcement in this current atmosphere, either financially or politically?
Financial wise, law enforcement it's a phenomenal career. It's one of the few jobs in this country that allow you to actually further your financial wellness, just because we have access to something others don't, and that is overtime. People always talk about the overtime cycle, it's a crutch. Well, I worked 20 hours of overtime a week in the beginning because I had to, or I couldn't pay my bills. And then I learned this magical concept of, I can use overtime to further my financial career. In the civilian population, if you want to make some advancements in your financial, again, whether it's paying off debt, saving for the vacation, saving for retirement, we don't have to go do Uber Eats or have a garage sale. We just go sign up for the overtime board. I remember my department, they cut our overtime one year because they messed up on one of our overtime programs. And my chief called me in. He's like, "Are you going to be okay financially?" And I'm like, "Sir, thank you for the vacation." He goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Man, I've been working overtime this year to max out my wife's 401k plan. Like, we're using it for those kinds of things, not because we're trying to elevate our standard of living." So know that law enforcement, even in smaller paying agencies, because of that overtime aspect thing, can really help you. Now, don't get stuck on the overtime cycle, but use it as a way to further your career with that.
Nick, every time we talk, I learn something, and I also gather something to share with my friends, my family, and my own students. I can't thank you enough. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you?
So you can follow us on any of our social media platforms. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all those at financialcop.com. And then, of course, as always, our website, www.financialcop.com as well.
I'll tell you, Nick Daugherty, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.